Hello and welcome to the conversation right here on News Central Television. I am Rita Omodia. On the conversation, we get to discuss trending political stories around the African continent. Now, on today's edition of the conversation, we will be discussing INEC's National Commissioner's comment, Festus Okoye, on the glitch encountered during the upload of the February 25 presidential election in Nigeria and the introduction of proof of ownership certificate levy of 1,000 naira for motorists. And later on the show, we would look at the political situation in Zimbabwe, where the Citizens Coalition for Change has issued a 24-hour ultimatum to 41 fraudulent candidates affiliated with the opposition party led by Nelson Chamisa. We'll have the discussions after this break. Stay with us. Now we begin in Nigeria, where the Independent National Electoral Commission has addressed the glitch encountered during the upload of the February 25 presidential election in Nigeria. INEC National Commissioner Festus Okoye emphasized that this technical issue should not undermine the entire nationwide elections. Okoye's response came after the European Union Election Observation Mission submitted their final report on the 2023 general elections on Monday. He urged Nigerians not to pass judgment on the Electoral Commission solely based on the challenge faced during the upload of the presidential election results. Meanwhile, announcement of the introduction of the proof of ownership certificate verification fee of 1,000 naira by the federal government is generating reactions. Starting from July 2023, Lagos State will initiate the collection of this fee from motorists. And joining us for this discussion, we have Dr. Jide Johnson. He's the Director of Special Programs, Nigerian Institute of Journalism. He joins us from Lagos, Nigeria. We also have Adenike Aloba. She is the Program Directorate of DataFight. She joins us from Abuja in Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us on the conversation.
Thank you for having me. Barka de Salah to all our Muslim brothers and sisters all over the world. Eid Mubarak to every one of them.
Definitely. Eid Mubarak to all our Muslim viewers across Africa, of course, the rest of the world. And talking about the conversations at hand on this special day, I mean, judging from the general conduct of the previous elections, Jide, would you agree with the Independent National Electoral Commission that glitches witnessed does not totally mar the elections? Because you're saying Nigerians should not judge them due to few glitches here and there in the presidential election.
Now, you set the benchmark, you give the assurances, you heighten the hope of Nigerians, you encourage them to register, and Nigerians en masse went and registered for the election. For the very first time, we had a lot of first-time voters participating in the electoral process, the younger generation, as a result of the enthusiasm you've created with your various publicity program and your various actions here and there. And then you ask Nigerians for support. And through the National Assembly, every money requested for was made available. You also required the support of Nigerians. Pressure was exerted on the executive to finally assent to the electoral bill into an act in 2022, which INEC itself termed as the game changer, because you said you are going to deploy technology and you are going to have real-time results, and that the votes of Nigerians for the very first time will count. You made all of these promises, and at the end of the day, you failed to live up to your own promises. So what do you expect from Nigerians? To give you a pat on the back, to applaud you, or to sing praises of you, or for them to question your capacity to conduct basic election where you have been given all the requirements to succeed. So as far as I'm concerned, the INEC Director of Publicity and Voters Education is just playing to the gallery. It's playing the ostrich. A lot of, to whom much is given, I'll end with this so that my colleague can contribute. To whom much is given, much is expected. And that much which was given to INEC, less was gotten from it by Nigerians.
I'm going to pick up on that last line you said, to whom much is given, much is expected. But we also know the issues that technology can bring. And as much, some people are saying, just like INEC is saying that, these are just few issues that were encountered. Now, for you, Adenike, in your candid opinion, what measures could be used to characterize a free and fair election that Nigerians have so much clamored for? And do you think that this excuse that is given by INEC is justified, looking at how technology can be generally? Adenike, can you hear me? Okay, while we wait to get Adenike online with us, I'm going to... All right. Go on, please, if you can hear me.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I mean, so can you hear me bit is kind of like a good way to look at this, because technology is junky. Can you hear me?
Yes, please, go on.
Okay, so technology is janky, especially because of the state of our infrastructure in Nigeria, the depth of penetration of the internet itself. And so while it is no excuse for INEC, they had 4 years to prepare for this. Nobody forced their hands to use technology. They told us it was going to be game changing. It is understandable and should present sort of like a way for us to begin to think about the next 4 years, to begin to say, okay, how do we resolve the issues that we know that technology has? I do not absolve INEC, of any of their, or nor do I agree. I think that Mr. Festus would have done well to take that report from the observer mission and say, okay, we see where we've done wrong and we're going to do better, rather than attempting to justify, sort of like what they did. But I do know that technology does require some work. It does require some attention, and especially in our climate where we know that we have challenges with technology. I think the stakes of the election kind of also blurred. We didn't allow, it did not, we didn't allow the realities of the country we live in to regulate our expectations about the election. And so I think that now that we know that technology can play an important role, and we know that the infrastructure around technology can impact on how technology plays this role, we can then begin to ask, going to clap only if you do what you promise. So yes, technology can be challenging, but then we have an opportunity ahead of us now to begin to ask the broader question of technological infrastructures, of the penetration of internet in the country. And the good thing is, if we begin to address these problems, it not only solves our challenges with the election, it solves a lot of problems across board as a country. It solves a lot of developmental problems, or begins to solve developmental problems for us. So no, their excuse is it's an excuse, but it is understandable in the context of just how challenging technology can be. I mean, we're on this call right now, and there's a bit of, oh, can you hear me? Are you there? It's the reality of technology in the country, but we have an opportunity now. I always like to look forward. Okay. Because we can't turn back the dial of time and say, oh, let's redo it all over again. How do we do it better the next time? How do we make sure they do it better the next time? And it's to begin to pay attention to those infrastructural issues that need to be dealt with so that technology can do what it's supposed to do in an election.
Now, still on this issue of technology, because this is what is bringing about this issue there. We've been clamoring for free and fair elections and talking about this electoral bill that was transmitted because of this, so that we could have electronic transmission of results. Now, Jide, that's going over to you there, because you said there was a lot of expectations that INEC gave, and they gave a lot of promises for it. Now, still looking at future elections and looking at the whole impact of technology, what do you think can be done to make sure that, for better elections in future elections, and we were still having elections in November for by-elections, what can be done to make sure that these sort of things are dealt with?
Of democracy is for the will of the people to succeed at the end of the day. And the vote cast is what determines who is elected, and not the votes manipulated by those that are charged with that responsibility. The challenges we have always had in the past has to do with the collation and announcement of results, not actually what happens at the polling units, but what happens at the collation center. And INEC brought about beavers with respect to accreditation and with respect to real-time viewing of results. And they talk about IRF, which ordinary citizen could visit and check the result in real time.
Yeah.
And it was said this to be a game changer. So as far as every one of us is concerned, deploy it, don't manipulate the process. We have seen thus far that there are various attempts to sabotage that process. How do we forestall that in future? How do we prevent that from
I want you to talk more about that manipulation you're talking about, because these are very serious, grave allegations against INEC.
The word manipulation is deliberate tampering with a process. Now, it's a deliberate tampering with a process, altering the process of something. So now, when you have a technology and there is an human attempt to reverse the course of that technology, that's manipulation. You'll recall the technology did not work for the presidential result. It worked for the National Assembly election. How do you explain that? Based on what we have had thus far, the technology worked for the gubernatorial election and the House of Assembly election. Now, 3 elections were held on the same day in February 25th. For 2 of the elections, it worked. For one of the elections, which is a critical election, which is a one constituency, the presidential election is a one constituency election. It did not work. So you begin to ask that question, where did it really go wrong? What were the things that we did right and we didn't do right? And what are the things that we need to? As far as this issue is concerned, it is for us to allow the process to take its focus and to hold those accountable. You see, when you give somebody responsibility, they must give an account of the responsibility you have given to them. Is to hold people accountable. Is to hold them. Look at the huge amount of money we budgeted for the deployment of this technology. Look at the huge amount of money we have spent on this election, the entire electoral process, the voters registration, voters education, then the actual conducting of the election. So if you look at the amount of money, are we getting the appropriate return on investment? That's the question. So if you are not getting the appropriate return on investment, people should be held accountable. People should be prosecuted for failure to do the basic constitutional requirement, the basic institutional requirement that they've been empowered to do. And that's the problem. But that's not the issue in Nigeria. It seems as if it's business as usual. You know what? We glossed over what happened in 2019. We came to 2023. I can assure you, we glossed over what happened in 2023. And then in 2027, we'll be repeating the same thing again over and over and over again. And then we seem to be in a vicious cycle, not making any progress. The bottom line is to hold people accountable. Look at what happened in Adamawa, for example. If what happened in Adamawa had been allowed to succeed, now the beneficiary of that outcome will be the governor today, and the non-beneficiary of that outcome will be in court challenging the illegality of the action of the resident electoral commissioner for that place. And what have you had concerning that case? What have you had concerning that case? Technology on its own cannot have problem. It is the manipulation of people that have been employed or that have been empowered to deploy the technology that creates you might have glitches here and there, but you don't have. What we had was a total collapse. What we had was a total collapse.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Johnson. You've raised a very valid point. Now, we talk about money manipulation, and that was why there was now electronic transmission. But unfortunately, you're alleging to electronic manipulation also and a total collapse of the old system. Now, still on this, I'm going to go back to Adenike. And in terms of voter accreditation, Okoye maintained that nobody has faulted the functionality of the bimodal voter accreditation system, that is the BVAS, that is what's used to accredit people. I don't know if you, of course, if you participated in an election, and I'm sure your polling units and what exactly you observed from friends and relatives, would you agree with this assertion that there was no fault in the functionality of the BVAS that Festus Okoye has said?
Okay, if I mean the network is a bit, I'm struggling a little bit, but if you're asking about the voter accreditation process,
Yes.
we know that there were places where it worked well, and there were places where it didn't work quite well. So there are two things that are at play here, and just allow me to quickly reference the last questions you asked, uh, um, um, Mr. Jide, and it's that this is the one thing that we need to pay attention to. The Electoral Act, the 2022 Electoral Act, did not say that they will do it with technology. It actually left it open for the commission to determine how it wants to transmit elections. That in itself is almost like a catch-22, because now they have said they will do it a certain way, and they were not able to achieve that properly. But I think that it's important. Yes, I hope that the law will take its full course. The provisions of the Electoral Act 2022 says that the officers in charge, they are the ones liable. So there is no instance where the entirety of INEC is going to be punished for this. It's that the people have to come forward and say, oh, this person who managed this polling unit is responsible for manipulation and all of that. Now, so the reality is, I monitored elections on elections day, both for national and state elections. And the reality is, yes, there were challenges with accreditation in some places, but we also have records of people staying to vote up until 2 a.m. in the morning, which means that the thing might not have worked before because there were eyes on them and there were people reporting and people talking about it. They stayed and made sure that everybody who was there registered. We also have details of polling units where nobody showed up. There were not a lot of people who showed up. So the problem is, look, a human system where we have human beings, given the state of our country, given the depth of corruption that we know as a country, it will take time for us to. And I agree, we have to pay attention to it. We have to call it out. But much more than saying you did bad, we also then have to bear some responsibility on, okay, how can we help you do it better? How can we point the way to doing it better? This is the way to check, the human challenges that can crop up and mess up technology. And this is the way to check infrastructural challenges that will mess these things up. So I mean, I trust that whatever is happening in courts will happen, but I'm looking ahead and saying, look, there's an off-cycle election starting in November. How do we make sure that we're not back again on News Central talking about how it did not work or how it did work in Kogi and all of these places that elections is going to happen? What can we do? These are the questions we need to now start posing to INEC. Are we again going to have challenges with upload? What problems are you having right now? How do you want to solve it? We need to begin to ask them those questions ahead of November. One, it's awareness that people are watching. We've not all gone to sleep because the general elections are over. Our eyes are still on this. Two, it gives an opportunity for those who want to engage, for those who want to help, to say, okay, this is how we can support you in this way, or this is how, I mean, Nigeria is like the tech hub of Africa. And it seems like is having challenges, using technology in its election. So how can these tech hubs that we have, the tech talent that we have help? This is the time to begin to pose those important questions to INEC to make sure that whatever challenges we had with the general elections in February and March, it does not repeat in the off-cycle elections, but also we are not back here in 4 years' time saying, oh, see how these things went bad again. This is my slight departure from a lot of the, INEC failed us. Yes, INEC failed us. How do we make sure they don't continue to fail us? How do we keep our eyes on them? What are the important things? How do we look at the Electoral Act and say, okay, perhaps if we can, and I know this is asking a lot, perhaps if we can go back to that Electoral Act and modify and make electronic transmission not just at the prerogative of the commission, but something that is by law, or something that is by law. How do we, is there some room to begin some kind of advocacy, for some kind of lobbying to make sure that electronic transmission, because at the end of the day, when INEC is done telling you, oh no, we tried, we did our best, then they come back and tell you, guys, this is really at our prerogative, and we have been nice by doing this. And I know I'm taking some liberties with how they describe this, but that's the reality. So where do we need to focus attention now? How do we make sure that Beavers achieves or does what it's supposed to do? What kind of eyes on the ground? What kind of accountability and transparency system can we begin to mount up now ahead of these off-cycle elections to make sure that, hey, guys, you are repeating this mistake again, or, oh yeah, you dealt with this, which means you listen. I think it's important that we begin to look at it from that perspective.
All right, thank you so much, Adenike. And still on these modifications, Jide Johnson, I'm still hammering on what Okoye said and saying that nobody faulted the functionality of the beavers. We'll also remember that within the whole process, before the governorship election, there was a reconfiguration of the IREF portal. We saw situations like that. So moving forward, do you also oppose to what happened then? And what are the remodifications that you think will be needed for future elections when we're looking at November by-elections? Because you talked about the fact that there has been manipulation of the whole process.
Well, I don't. The issue of the configuration is a major issue at the Presidential Election Petition Tribunal. We wait for the outcome of that decision to see. And a lot of people have spoken with respect to the assurances INEC gave with respect to whether the reconfiguration will not affect the storage of the results of the presidential election. Let's wait for that particular outcome. But the question, or you have also seen from other tech experts saying that there was no basis or no need for that configuration at that particular point in time. At the end of all the petitions at the Election Petition Tribunal and the Supreme Court will come to reality with what Adenike said with respect to areas that we need advocacy to ensure that it will not only be in the guideline, because in the INEC guideline, it was INEC that wrote the guideline themselves that talked about. It's not in the act, but in the guideline, in the policy framework for the election, INEC itself pointed out that there will be electronic transmission of the result through the use of the technology they have deployed, and they didn't comply with their guideline. So we hope at the end of the day, those issues highlighted will form the basis of the advocacy for the review of the Electoral Act 2022. Because if you...
Dr. Johnson, are you still with us? Okay. All right, while we're still trying to get Dr. Johnson, I'm going to go over to Adenike, and still on this issue, I mean, while we still have elections issues there, and there's a lot of postmortems on how well Nigerian went with the election, we also have issues of this certain fee that has been given, because we saw a statement by the Minister of Transportation, Abdulaziz Totola, on this proof of ownership certificate track. I'm moving away a bit from election matters now to other situations at hand in Nigeria. You talked about the car theft and recovery of stolen vehicles and the fact that Nigerians would have to pay 1,000 naira for this particular fee. With all what that is going now, do you think that this will be realistic? Do you think that this will achieve the aim that the ministry has set?
Okay, so Mr. Toriola and what he said about, oh yeah, car theft, that made me laugh, because I thought, really, you need to charge me a little extra in a country that has a police, in a country that has a functional interior ministry.
Okay, so Adenike, just hold on that thought. Just hold on that thought. We'll get back to you. I think we have Dr. Johnson with us. So, Dr. Johnson, I'll allow you to complete your thoughts on the final statements you were making while we also talk about the issues at hand of the 1,000 naira that the Ministry of Transportation has said from the federal government, talking about the proof of ownership certificate verification fee. So, first of all, let's finalize your thoughts on the modification of the electoral process and the situation at hand at the moment.
And the one highlighted by the EU electoral observers report that was presented yesterday will form the basis of the advocacy for the review of the Electoral Act of 2022 moving forward to 2027. On the issue of the new tariff or taxes that has been introduced with respect to proof of car ownership, that I have to prove my ownership of the car, there are some of the things that I hope that this government will leave to all what it has campaigned for, as far as as Bola Ahmed Tinubu is concerned, he's been an advocate for deregulation. He's been an advocate for devolving powers to the constituent units. He's been an advocate for power going back to the local government, the state government, and adequate sharing of power among the constituent unit for us to have both fiscal federalism and then operational federalism. And that's the reason why when he established 37 local development council areas in Lagos State under Obasanjo administration. And I hope
Jide Johnson, can you hear us?
that those local government will be ready. The issue of correction.
Okay, so while we're trying to get Dr. Johnson, Adenike, I think you have the floor now. So I want you. Can you hear me?
Okay. I can hear you, yes.
Okay, all right, wonderful. So let's have your own take on all of this, because a lot of Nigerians have been complaining, I mean, since yesterday, and we have other documents that car owners pay. So would you agree with this initiative? I mean, we're looking at a situation where somehow we're having duplications of functions in Nigeria. We're trying to reduce costs. We're looking at the whole, economy and all of that. Is it actually necessary?
Yeah. So as to the necessity of a 1,000 naira proof of ownership verification certificate, I'm struggling to find the necessity. I think that in terms of policy decisions, I think that we're rethinking, revenue generation for the country, and perhaps this is one such way to, collect taxes where necessary. The problem is that these amounts to multiple layers of taxation that Nigerians have to deal with. How do I go through a very hectic process, by the way, to renew my car papers every year, and you still want me to go through a separate process, pay a separate money for proof of ownership certificate? Why are all these things not streamlined in a way that, one, operationally doesn't stress Nigerians, and two, we really do have to respond to the question of multiple taxation? We're paying payee taxes, there's so many layers. We're paying VAT, and I know that there's a lot of talk around the fact that, Nigerians are not taxed enough, that we're one of the lowest taxed countries in the world. While there's some legitimacy to that argument, the bigger issue is that it's not so much that we're not taxed enough, it's that the administration of taxes is poor. And so even in the taxes that are being collected, is not being properly collected. So if the government is looking to taxes for revenue generation, they have to figure out how to streamline all these taxes, because that's one of the real issues, in that even the taxes you are collecting right now, you're not able to collect it well enough. So if you've not figured that out and you're introducing new taxes, I wonder, are you feeling the temperature of the people at all? Subsidy has just been removed. There's a lot of noise that, electricity tariff is going to be increased. And now we're introducing a new layer of taxation for people to pay some amount of money. We already have to renew our driver's licenses every 3 years or 5 years. We already have to renew car papers. We already have to pay for car insurance. And now, again, you're introducing a new layer of taxation. I understand that the government does have to take action. And, like Mr. Johnson was saying before, Network knocked him off about how, devolution of powers and having local government, get some autonomy and operational federalism. And I get that. I know that means that at the local government level, some taxes will be introduced. Some taxes exist already. And so when I'm talking about synthesizing all this tax collection operations, this is what I mean. Why is there a new tax being introduced when they're not efficient in collecting taxes like the tenement rates, and all of these other taxes? So I would say, on one hand, Nigerians are kind of tired. We're being taxed everywhere, and this is government tax. Not to talk of what is known as black tax, where because of the economic situation in the country, you have multiple people taxing you on whatever income you have. There's that on that one level, but on a policy formulation and policy operationalization level, yes, the government needs to generate revenue. Yes, tax is going to be a significant part of that. Yeah. But I think that a bigger problem when it comes to taxation is less about increasing the number of taxes that people pay, and more about finding a way to streamline, to have proper operations around the collection of existing taxes. So on two ends, it's just not kind of
Definitely,
because
definitely
again,
lots of things. You talked about the operationality of all of it, the necessity of all of it, and I'm sure you've spoken the minds of a lot of Nigerians. It's been a wonderful conversation. We went from talking about the elections procedures, talking about the IREF portal, the beavers, and now we're concluding with this proof of certificate ownership of cars that the government has put in. That's a 1,000 naira levy. Thank you so much, Dr. Jide Johnson and Adenike Aluba, for joining us on this conversation. We definitely continue to have such conversations that center around the policies in Nigeria. Thank you for joining us in the conversation.
Thank you very much for having me.
And now we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll go straight to Zimbabwe, looking at the elections. The opposition is talking about infiltration, talking about when you look at their candidates' list for the elections. We'll have such discussions after the break. Do stay with us. Six. Good evening, Mr. Sidix.
Yes, good evening. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for inviting me.
Yes, thanks for accepting our invitation. Seems like where you are is quite dark.
Yes, I'm in the car. Actually, outside, I think my internet is a bit elusive. So I just decided to go outside, which is so much better in terms
Okay.
of
Is it possible,
internet
Six, that you could turn
connectivity.
on the light in your car so that we could have a bit of visual? And
Yes, they are already on.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Then can you put your device on landscape, please, Sidix? Thank you so much. Tawanda, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. So I'll be with you shortly. Thanks for staying with us on the conversation. On the first half, we dealt with situations in Nigeria, talking about the elections, the IREF portal and the beavers, the use of it in Nigeria for the previous general elections. And right now, let's go to Zimbabwe, where the Citizens Coalition for Change has issued a 24-hour ultimatum to 41 alleged fraudulent candidates affiliated with the opposition party led by Nelson Chamisa. The CCC alleges that these candidates forged signatures and submitted nomination papers illegally. They have demanded that the candidates withdraw their nominations or face arrest on civil and criminal charges. Zai Mahiri, the spokesperson for CCC, stated in a press release that the party has objected to the presence of double candidates based on the procedures outlined in the Electoral Act. The opposition party has yet to receive a response from the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission (ZEC) regarding their complaint. The party has accused certain individuals of infiltrating the candidate selection process during the nomination court proceedings. And joining us for this conversation, we have Sidix Muradzikwa, a political analyst who joins us from Harare in Zimbabwe. We also have Tawanda Mutungama, a political analyst. He joins us from Tajikistan. Gentlemen, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you.
Wonderful. So I'm going to begin with you, Tawanda. I'm going to begin with you, Tawanda. We're trying to get some background knowledge of what exactly happened. So why does the CCC accuse these candidates of forging signatures and submitting nomination papers illegally? Let's have a background context of the situations at hand.
So to give background, I would say the opposition has faced a challenge of double candidacy from the past, and what that does, it's called a spoiler effect. A spoiler effect, meaning if similar people or similar candidates compete for the same role, none of them has a chance to win. So what does that mean? It means if there are two candidates who are CCC and one candidate is ZANU-PF, even though the candidate for ZANU-PF may, for example, have 40% of the ballot, and then the other 60% is 30% on CCC candidates, both CCC candidates lose the election. So they should not split the vote. So, and in order not to split votes, the party has to have one. So what am I saying? So I'm saying it's important to have order in a party. And how do you achieve order? So order comes when the selection of candidates is done. All the candidates are driven in a certain way to support one candidate. And without unifying candidates, votes are split and the election is lost. And once the election is lost for parliamentary candidates, even the presidential candidate is at loss, because if they don't have a two-thirds majority, they can have a vote of no confidence. So if advocate Nelson Chamisa wins the election, but he doesn't have enough MPs in parliament, it's of no good. So he will eventually have a vote of no confidence. So there is need to put the house in order, one candidate per post and not dual candidates. And people who don't belong to the party should not contest the election using the party name. It is fraud, and I think they are justified to prosecute these people. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Tawanda. I want to bring in Six into this conversation, and we're still trying to understand how exactly this happened while we're having double nominations, while we're seeing forged signatures and submitting nomination papers illegally. How is this happening to the CCC? I mean, what's your own take on this issue?
Well, what has actually happened it remains oblivious to everyone. Why? Because only CCC spokesperson Gift Siziba and Father Mahir, they have come out publicly denouncing the issue that has obtained or hit the part at the center of the part, which is the issue you are mentioning of double candidates. But they are vehemently dismissing, objecting that it is something that has happened within the agreement, within the quarters of the party. But what they are saying is obtained is actually something that needs to hide. Although publicly there are so many double candidates that have emerged within their party. There are allegations that the failure by the ZANU-PF party and its cronies to try to infiltrate the CCC party, and they're actually indicating that that is the reason why we have been hiding our things or hiding the internal processes of the party. So they were actually avoiding such incidents of double candidates, and they actually mentioned from the beginning that they are not going to announce the names of those who are lodging the papers. And actually, the CCC, as we all know, it doesn't have structures because of fear of infiltration by Central Intelligence Organization and ZANU-PF at large. So these are only allegations which needs to be verified as to what really transpired. But from what is on the ground, they are actually pinpointing and blaming the FAS organization, which is closely linked to ZANU-PF and the CIO. But who knows, remains veiled in obscurity as to what really transpired, but indications are that there are candidates who did not file their papers or lodge their papers according to the party in terms of the signatures, their forged signatures. So that is what is actually obtained as according to Gift to Ostalosis and Father Emahe.
Okay, thank you so much, Sidix. Now, Tawanda, rather, looking at these situations, we've seen the CCC point accusing fingers because a lot of people want to know how exactly this happened. They're saying that the ruling ZANU-PF has a part to play in all of this. They talked about trying to infiltrate the party and that they're responsible for this chaos that has happened within their party. So within the context of the political terrain in Zimbabwe, why would the CCC accuse ZANU-PF of these infiltrations?
Well, I think in contest to attain power, I think all things are on the table. All cards are on the table, and it is important for people to protect their own party. So in this case, I think there is need for a disciplinary process or ways to show power, ways to show that when such a thing is done, the party can discipline people who fraudulently use their name. And in this case, would expect the president to not to go back on prosecution. And if it's not prosecution, probably use other means to ensure there is order in the use of a brand. For example, if you Mercedes, if you are not Mercedes, you should be prosecuted. So it's the same with a political brand. It should be sacred, and no one should be able to use it and without consent, because the effect is loss on the brain.
Tawanda, I understand what you're saying, that people who are found culpable of this act should be punished. But why is the ZANU-PF been called in the matter of the CCC, where they dared during the nomination of their party members? Why is ZANU-PF being involved with their party matters?
Well, if they can do it, if there are weaknesses in a party, I think they can do it. But it is not up to just blaming another party. So if it's CCC, it should be able to have its own processes and strength to protect the brand. At the same time, if it's possible for ZANU-PF to use the CCC brand, why does the CCC also dualize candidates and use the name of ZANU-PF to just do a similar thing probably in the rural areas and split the votes in the rural areas as they would protect their votes in the city? So if it's that easy, why not do it? So the most plausible thing is to protect your own party, to have internal processes, to have discipline in the party, and not only discipline, to be able to sweet talk your members, to say, look, please wait, your chance will come, or if we win this parliamentary election, you will get this in government, so that people are motivated not to compete for just one position. So it's also about using the charisma that the leadership has to convince its members not to outcompete each other, thereby both losing. It's like the parable which is given in the Bible, where the child had died, and the two prostitutes came to Solomon, and when an offer to kill the child was given, the other woman says, let's kill, because they have nothing to gain. So in this case, Advocate Nelson Chamisa would need to show wisdom in order to see who is genuinely CCC, and those who are not genuinely CCC should be thrown under the bus. And strength is required at national level, and discipline and order is required in a leader who could lead a nation. So Advocate Nelson Chamisa must show leadership and must show strength if he will be able to lead a country.
Definitely lots of things that the party needs to do to get its house in order, because these are very grave allegations and serious issues going on within the party. I'm going to bring Siddiq into this conversation. Now, I wonder what the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission has had to say concerning this. Have they responded to the allegations made by the CCC to these grievous offences, the ultimatum that's been given to this 41 fraudulent people that they have mentioned? What has been the reaction of the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission?
In politics, there are some regulators of the political events which normally happens in our country. And in this case, ZEC has not gave or released any public official statement from its chambers. Nothing has been said so far with regards to this. And it is actually their duty to register all the people who probably lodges or file their papers, and like they did, it is actually within the confines of the law. So we're actually waiting for them to give its a verdict or its public statement with regards to this political or electoral malcontent which has happened. But I also wanted to reflect on some of the political errors which has been made by my brother, whereby he said if it is CCC is supposed also to do it. In politics, we all know that the Zimbabwean political terrain is inclined towards ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF do have control of 30 institutions. The chapter 12 institutions in which ZEC falls under is also captured by ZANU-PF. So there is no point whereby CCC can actually be able to come up with such a political maneuver to counter ZANU-PF. That political trickery is only a prerogative or a privilege that can be accessed by ZANU-PF just because it has the resources, state capture, and so and everything. So it's actually something which is extremely next to difficult for CCC to actually push such a political grand side that has been
now, Siddiq, quickly, I want you to answer this question, Siddiq, because they've been given a 24-hour ultimatum to the 41 alleged fraudulent candidates. Has there been any response from them? What are these people that have been charged doing, and what is CCC's next action if they fail to comply within this 24-hour ultimatum?
Actually, on the first day which happened, which this debacle happened, only 2 people came out publicly, and they were actually told that their names were submitted to ZEC. It was something that was obvious to them. They didn't know. They were actually utterly surprised by that political event. They didn't know, and they come out publicly clearly stating that we don't know, we didn't even file our names. They were actually surprised. But the other camp, they are yet to respond. That's why CCC has actually gave them an ultimatum of 24 hours for them to withdraw their candidature. And that is something that we are actually waiting for tomorrow to see if they are going to, if we are going to have more and more people from these who are in this political debacle to probably at least to give their responses or a statement. But we expect them to oblige to the CCC if they don't want to face the legal consequences or the legal consequences of this issue.
All right, thank you so much, Siddiq Mudra-Ditswa, for joining us on this conversation. We do wait and see if they will comply with the 24-hour ultimatum that's been given. And also, Tawanda, you talked about the show of strength that Nelson Chamisa has to give to the party to overcome these challenges. Thank you once again for sharing so much thoughts on this particular issue in Zimbabwe. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. And this as well will draw the curtains for today's edition of the conversation on the first half with dealt situations in Nigeria. We talked about what the electoral spokesperson, Festus Okoye, had to say, talk about the IRF portal in Nigeria, talk about the use of the BVS machine. We also talked about ways to enhance the electoral process for elections in Nigeria, especially when we talk about the electronic transmission of results. We just finished conversations in Zimbabwe where we've seen infiltration, the nomination of candidates. And we talked about the show of strength for the party. We'll definitely continue to keep our eyes fixed on these developing situations. Thank you so much for joining us on the conversation for today. I'm Rita Modia. Till next time. Bye-bye.